potentially a composition. It's potentially a composition copyright as well. Considering that both of them are in play, it's actually hard for you to license any music that you use anybody else's material in. So if you want to do music licensing in the studio, not only should you save every piece of it, you should probably replace every single loop, every single external thing you use with your own original material. Then you'll have a much easier time. I see Michael nodding. It's a real problem with a lot of musicians who think they can do it, which is why it tends to be a narrow thing that most people have a hard time getting in. They don't know that music supervisors have to make sure that there is no infringement. If there is, there's some pretty steep fines. That is their job, to make sure that you own, as they call it, 200%, which is 100% of the composition and 100% of the sound recording. And all of these things are things you should note, just write down really quickly. Hopefully 4 to 5 minute little overview is kind of helpful. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, Michael, why don't you talk a little bit about what it's like on the music supervisor side, in terms of clearing music and what you have to go through, and what are some things you wish you knew musicians knew up front, from your perspective?
Um, yeah, well, Randy summed it up pretty well. There can be a lot of moving parts, particularly when you take that idea that there's a minimum of two copyrights being, the composition and the sound recording, and then you break that up further where, maybe there's four, five, six in some cases when it comes to hip hop, 30 writers on a single composition, and they may each have their own publisher. And then there's a record label that takes care of the recording, and usually there's just one, but in some cases there can be multiple record labels, even when it comes to different territories. It's not super common, but it's not uncommon with majors where it's like Warner Brothers has North America, but Sony has Western Europe, and Universal has the Balkans or something. I don't know, but then you're negotiating rights with all of those parties to get them on the same page. And one thing that I don't know if I don't think that you mentioned, but there's a clause that is very commonly bandied about in this side of the business called the MFN, which applies in a variety of different ways, but most specifically, when it comes to the composition fee versus the master fee, these things are usually most favored nations, which is the long way of saying an MFN, which is, in other words, that the fee for the composition generally has to be the same as the fee for the recording. And there's exceptions to that, but usually those two things are the way they are. So let's say you've got a publisher and you're negotiating a licensing fee with the publisher, and you say, I have $5,000 for this, and they go, okay, we'll clear that. And then the record label says, okay, we'll clear 5,000 MFN with the publisher. So that's a $10,000 sync now. But if there's 5 publishers and 3 record labels involved in this, you've got to get them all on the same page for all of that. So you just, like everything else in life, some things are easier than others, and people either want to be transactional or not. It's great when everybody wants to play ball and get something done, but if the more people involved, the more the odds increase that somebody is going to be a problem in that scenario.
I'll speak to something really quickly. The opportunity for independent creators, because of situations like Michael and Randy spoke of. If you're an independent creative and you can pre-clear your music, like you're professional, you have your metadata organized, and you have quality music, you will be able to contend in this space, because a lot of times that's a lot of work, and that's not even their main job. It's so again, that's one of the reasons why I created Collab Music Network. It was really to focus in on high quality independent music creators, and helping them to utilize sync licensing as a strategy, as it relates to promoting their music in this space. And so I partner with them and help streamline that metadata creation and streamlining the collaboration process. So it's all in a box. You'll hear a term called one stop or easy clear, that's what they're talking about. It's like, hey, they got to deal with 8 different people. The average music supervisor is not going to do that with an independent music creator. Like they might do that for the big hits, right? But most times that's not even an option for independent music creators.
Yeah, with that, it really does come down to budget and fee. Like, if I've got a lot of money to spend on something potentially, then I mean, I'm not. It's not the end of the world to track down numerous rights holders. Um, I mean, I still, it's more work is more work, but it's just is the way it is sometimes on big songs. And if you've got a budget that can afford it, it's like that's just my job. But if I'm trying to like find a background cue for something, and I'm spending $3,000 to $5,000 on it, and I look at a song that we're interested in, and there's, you know, 5 writers and like a bunch of publishers, and I'm like, it's just not worth it for anybody. You guys
Not
have
worth it.
all that money, and at the end of the day, I'm going to get, into a negotiation over a $3,000 queue. Like, I'm just going to find something else that I can pay one person
One
for.
stop.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, Michael.
Maybe-
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah,
Go
what
ahead.
I was gonna say is it's like what I've learned from talking to a lot of musicians is they don't understand things from the point of view of a music supervisor, like what your job is, what you're trying to solve for the director, whoever you're working with as a producer, and what you want from them. And I'm just wondering if you don't mind going through it. I always love hearing these stories because I learn a lot from them too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cool thing about it is that like it can be very, very broad or very narrow depending on the needs of the project. Like at its most broad, I mean, anything that even touches music like can fall into my lap. Like you essentially run the music department. So everything creative, logistical, budgetary, and potentially even legal is all like filtered through me as the one that just like knows about it and has to get figured out. And within that, you have support. I mean, there's always like uh production attorneys that you can consult, and there's other people that you loop in for things. But that as the department head, if I need an orchestral contractor, or I need a music producer to come in and do something specific, or I need any of these things, that's my job to contract them, figure out what to pay them for them to solve a problem underneath my purview. So clearing songs is obviously a big part of it. Finding songs that go into scenes is a big part of it. I think that's what most people think of when they think of a music supervisor. It's like, oh, I'm picking songs, maybe negotiating the rights, and that can be a big part of it, but it can extend to, getting original music produced for on-camera music numbers. I mean, is there a song and dance routine in this scene? What does that sound like? Is it a song that we know and we're just getting a new recording made? Is it a totally brand new song? Who's writing the song? Like, is it maybe we're finding a couple of really well-known songwriters or pop stars, and we're putting them together to create something new. Who's going to own those copyrights? Is the production buying them out? Is that part of our asset portfolio now? Are we letting them keep the rights and just licensing it for them and having them do the song for us? Like, all of the like big picture things, as far as like, that impact revenue down the line. And then even just like the creative things about like, well, what do we want out of this for the scene? Is there a band on camera? Who's playing the instruments in that? Is that like, is this a union production? Do we need AFM sideliners? Can we cast extras and just have them hold guitars and pretend like they know what they're doing? What are they wearing even? Like, if that impacts the story, then that comes up like as something that, what do the instruments look like? What period are we shooting this in? Like, it's the 1970s. Okay, so then the instruments and the microphones, like they need to be period accurate. Like all of that stuff like comes down to what I'm involved in potentially. Or someone could just say, hey, we've got this indie film, we have a budget, we need 5 songs, can you go get these for us? And that might be all I'm doing in that one.
Also, I'm always going to be speaking from the independent creator side. And so I went through Arts and Business Council's Periscope program years ago, a few years ago. And I will say this, I did not even have my target audience right. I thought my target audience was music creators. And music creators are not my target audience. Michael is my target audience. So for independent creators, I think it's valuable everything that Michael just said, because he's telling you how his day or how his average project works. If you understand what he needs and can deliver it to him quickly, efficiently, and directly without all the fluff. Like if you can give the man what he needs, how likely is he to utilize you for a project or another project? So I wanted to note that. It's like right now we're getting great information from Michael about the problems and the challenges of his job. If you have the mindset to come in and solve problems for Michael and make a certain part of his job easier, likelihood and probability increases for that independent music creator who understands the nuances and challenges of his role.
Yeah, it's you definitely collect sort of like back pocket resources in this job as you go. Companies that you really like licensing from, just because they've got interesting stuff, but also they do their job well, and they're easy to work with, and you like them. Even down to specific artists. I mean, I will say that like it's tough to license directly very often from individual artists. Just because there's so many. But I also am, a human being that has friends, and I work in the entertainment business, so I know a lot of musicians, and just on a personal level, and I like those people. So I will occasionally license stuff directly from them if it works and I remember it or whatever. But yeah, it tends to be more kind of, you're going to companies that represent catalogs, yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Agents or publishers.
yeah.
But again, for the independent creative, it's just, again, even to get to Michael, there's, you got to be organized. You got to have your stuff together to be able to play the game with the next person who's relevant, which might be that sync agent or that music publisher. So y'all gonna hear me say it 1,000 times. Like, have your stuff, your music, your metadata together, and we'll go into details if people don't understand. It's just the basic information about who owns the rights to this music. It's clear who all is involved, and making sure that it's pre-cleared for the next party to get involved with.
Mimi, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what are the steps that an independent artist should go through to be prepared for sync?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I always say is listen to music that gets synced. Like, actually study the landscape. I'm not saying to compare your music to, but to be familiar with what is working in those different spaces. Or you can do the reverse and understand your music really well, and then find places that music works for. Once you got your sound and you got high quality and you got things that work for sync, I think it's a matter of organizing. A lot of times I'm working with people, they have great music, but they're so unorganized. It's hard to get them activated in the space. Because I mean, you got to pre-clear all their stuff. They got to find all their stems. So having a system, an organized system, to where when you create, you're collecting your stems, you're backing those stems up a couple times, you're finding out from the music supervisor or the sync rep, how do they like the music presented to them? Like, do they like waves? Do they want AIFF files? Like, really being granular about sourcing what people need. And everybody, Michael is one music supervisor. You may have 3 or 4 that want it 3, 4 different ways. Our job is to find out what they want and give it to them how they want it. And so then we become a value or an asset to that particular agent or publisher. The other thing is getting involved in a community of like-minded individuals who are creating that kind of music. Nothing cuts the learning curve like collaborating with people who know what they're doing. I started Collab Music Network because I was collaborating with a lot of people, and I learned so much in that process of collaborating. And it is, number one, essential. You can get there by yourself really slow and long, or you can join a group of creatives who have that same interest as you, who saying, hey, I want to get started in sync licensing. And that's going to just, again, I'm all about increasing probabilities. I'm all about, how, if we're going this way, how can we bullet there, and without compromising quality and effectiveness. So those are the 3 things that I would say that a person needs to do. Listen. Number one, listen to music that's being placed, understand where your music fits in that landscape. Number 2, organizing your metadata, again, getting your split sheet signed. I know that this is a nuance when it comes to independent creators. They don't think it's really important, but it is, because that split sheet is a legal document. It's a legal binding document among songwriters of who owns what. And then, of course, being a part of a creative community that is actively creating music for whether they're writing to briefs from music supervisors or they're doing their own research and they're going after that target. Those three things, I think, definitely put you in position quicker, faster than not knowing exactly where you're going.
Randy.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? I'm so glad you mentioned split sheets, Mimi. Too many musicians, you know what? I've learned never to assume that like all the people that we have in the room know what those are. So can I go over that real
Yeah,
quick?
break it down. Break it down.
Yeah, so there's actually a nuance to it that Michael will be especially glad to hear if we do it right, because what's very often not clear is the ownership. That's something that Michael needs to know because their directors, whoever he's working with, whoever the producer is basically trying to use an expert like him to make sure that the music is cleared. Remember, if anybody uses any piece of music, any composition, or any sound recording and puts it in a work like that, it's infringing if it's not cleared. Well, to do that, you need to actually show who owns it. And since there's two, you actually sometimes need two split sheets. It depends on how you're doing it. In the past, usually it's just that the record label would own the sound recording. That's the masters. You've heard that before. But a split sheet will actually designate here's everybody who has a piece of this composition. Sometimes that's split up between, hey, these are the people who wrote the music, here's who wrote the lyrics. It's done in a lot of different ways, but it's always down to a percentage, and it's signed and it is a legal contract. That is what you can use to show what's going on. There's another thing is that, as stated before, imagine that you're cooking for somebody who's allergic and you have to make sure nothing gets in it. That's where if you're using just putting together the song, but I just put in this little loop. Well, that little loop is not something that you originally owned, so you have to actually treat it that way. You should actually know the splits for the composition and the sound recording separately, and
And I'll say
establish it
this
ahead of
too.
time. Go ahead.
In today's market, traditionally, yes. In today's market, in the independent world, most independent creatives are the label and the publisher, and sometimes they
Absolutely.
don't understand
Yes.
that they are. So
Right.
I want to. There's two relationships that I found in this business that are most prominent, and in today's market, the independent creative is playing all four of those roles. The first relationship is the songwriter publisher, right? And
Yes.
that's two different people who have two different roles, but they get paid two different ways or from different entities. And then that other relationship, and that deals with the song, the actual composition. Then you have the artist and the label relationship, and that's going to deal with the sound recording. So again, just understanding when you're playing one, two, three, or four of those roles, you need to know because you put yourself in position. I have to collect as an artist, I have to collect as a label, I have to collect as a publisher, I have to collect as a songwriter. And understanding that is essential. Again, that's where we started the conversation at, but it's just a lot to grasp when in the independent market, you are all four of those. Those things are not being done for you, so you do have to understand what that means and how to register for those particular rights and royalties.
Mimi, you mentioned metadata earlier, but we
Yeah,
didn't find that either. So can you talk a little bit about what the metadata is and why that's so
yeah,
important? And
yeah.
how do you
I love this
register?
word. It's such a mystic word when you're dealing with because I remember when I first started, I'm like, what's metadata? It sounds like this afar off, but really, it literally is uh the ownership, who owns, so it's literally the songwriter, the publisher, who has master ownership. It's that information, it's the publishing line, it's also, the lyrics, it's also the metadata of tagging, like to granularly describe that song. It also includes what else, your stems could be a part of that metadata, making sure that that information is everywhere. So like you can embed in certain STEM files, you can embed your metadata in the files. We're in a very transient music business. Files get moved all around. And sometimes the reason why infringement occurs is because no, you end up with a file and you don't know where you got it from, who originated this file. So again, just all of that information, even if you have that on your split sheet, if you create your own sheet, and all of that information is stored, that's all a part of metadata.
Can I take it a little further? Because this is great.
Sure,
This is,
absolutely.
there's even more that according to other music supervisors I've talked to, and Michael might even add more to this. I actually happen to have the slide up and here I pulled up my little slide deck for references on when I teach this. So the other things that are useful that are not always included include the genre, instrumentation, style, BPM, mood, and of course the
Yeah, those.
description of the track. When
Yeah.
Michael goes to, let's say, a library, he's actually might have been asked by a director, is like, I got a love scene. It's like, well, what kind of music do you want? It's like, I don't know, it's love, but I need it to be a slower BPM and I want it to be guitar based. Well, you can't find that unless the description, the words actually say that, so that when you upload it. So when you make your own music, you actually have a lot of little pieces of data beyond even like all these together. Everything Mimi said, which was this much, and I just added just a little couple more things. There's all these things are
That's a
really
part of the
useful.
tagging. That's a part of the tagging process. Those 4 or 5 extra
Right.
lines. That's how you tag your music so that you can know exactly what's in your catalog. So that when you are interfacing with a Randy or a Mike or anybody, you know exactly. You are an expert on your music. You know exactly. Like nobody. A music, to me, in my opinion, a music supervisor should be able to look at your tags and know if they want to click on it to see if it fits for what they're working for.
Should
If
also
they
come up in search engines if they're looking for a
yes,
particular BPM or style or
yeah.
whatever they're looking for.
Most music supervisors, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, just from what I've been told, they don't have the time to listen to as much music as we think they do. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I mean, there's not very many ways to speed up the process of listening to a song because it's linear. I mean, you can skip around in it, but unfortunately, like a 3-minute song takes 3 minutes to listen to. Like, unless you're just listening to less than 3 minutes of it, which is, that's kind of the only way. It's like you can't like I'd have to, create some new technology to bend the rules of physics to listen to music faster. And it adds up, so there's a lot of stuff to listen to. Yeah, I think when it comes to metadata, the thing is the sky's kind of the limit these days. Like you can add like so much information, and that's fine. I would say that like more is like go nuts if you want to. Personally, I'm pretty easy when it comes to like the things that I just need out of metadata in a song.
Cool.
Like as long as I know who owns it on both sides, and how to contact you, that's kind of really that's like the minimum, and for the most part it's fine.
right.
I think it's great that new platforms like Disco and stuff like that allow you to put like everything from lyrics to like bios and fucking headshots and whatever you want in there, and
All the things.
it's great. It's great. I mostly can like do without all of it, with the exception of like you contact info for who the owners are.
Good.
The things like tags, like for how the music sounds visually and that kind of thing, I think are generally, like you said, they're useful because they become searchable within libraries. That's how like the algorithms like then categorize like where to find them. And I think if you know that your songs are going to be in a certain library, then and that's how it works, then absolutely do it. I'm a bit of a princess in the sense that like I don't search through libraries for stuff. Like I will just contact the person that reps the library and tell them what I need and have them do that work,
Oh,
because I
no
don't
way. That's
I
awesome to
don't
know. Good to
yeah.
know.
I mean,
Efficiency, efficiency.
You want a concierge kind of experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
basically, like, I mean, it's their job. Like, they know their catalog. I'm not gonna push a bunch of buttons on and learn at somebody's new search platform on a million different websites. They're all
got
competing
it.
platforms.
Absolutely.
One thing that streamlined that a little bit, and this is very recent, that I don't hate is the new AI functionality for search that are starting to get implemented into libraries. That has
Yeah.
definitely made that easier and made me more willing to kind of do some of that work on my own,
Good.
because you can then take like a Spotify link or a YouTube link if I'm looking for a song that sounds like X, and I can just like put that into their search platform, and their AI algorithm will try to like match it with stuff they have that's similar. And
Yeah.
I've used a couple that are like startlingly good, where it's like,
Mm.
wow, the results are, and it's much faster than like the sliders and the BPM buttons and all the different things. And I hated using that stuff. I just wouldn't do it. I would just be like, send me the songs from your catalog. I want something sounds like this. Send me 10 good options, you know?
Oh, got it.
But when the tagging is still useful internally for their own like churn operations.
On
So if
purpose.
you know
Yeah.
your song's going to be an APM, then you should follow their guidelines for tagging. But for me, I'm just like, I just need to know when I have this song on my desk and it's a MP3 file or whatever, that the metadata for who owns it is in there, so I can reach out if I want it.
Awesome.
Michael,
Awesome.
will you talk a little bit? So we mentioned libraries and catalogs, and so, but we haven't dug into what that like what that means, because you said earlier you mostly don't work directly with individual artists. That's a rare occurrence. So
Yeah.
who do you work with? How, what is a library? What is a catalog? Who manages those? Where do they exist? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the places that, yeah, the places that license music are record labels, music publishers, music libraries, or this like third animal that is this sort of like hybrid kind of boutique music licensing company, agency, whatever you want to call it, which is usually some combination of music library or and like kind of just like, I guess sync rep is what you might call it. It's like they're not a label, they're not a publisher. Their revenue comes specifically from synchronization. They represent the like specific artists and only for synchronization. Um, and a lot of these companies are specifically one stop. Some of them aren't. Some only represent masters. Some only represent publishing. Some have some combination. You know, the people that run those companies will tell you how that breaks down. But I list them as like a third thing, because the term library, as it's come to be known in the way I conceive of it, means that it's either production music, which was created specifically to be owned by this company in its entirety, and just, you know, like slapped in at like the lowest possible fee tier. It's not really like created by any specific person, even though all it was, but it's not like a band or an artist. It's like a piece of music that was made, you know? So that it fills a niche that we all need. It's not sexy. We don't love to talk about it, but not every song and every show and every movie can be the cool hit, big budget track, like, or we would just spend too much money. You have to sort of prioritize your music budget. And it's like, I know I have like 10 hit songs and that's going to take up 80% of my budget. And this is the music that the money I have left for music, and I need stuff to go in the background of a restaurant and in an elevator and somewhere in a car. You're not spending $50,000 on those syncs. You're spending like 500 bucks, $1,000, and that's what you go to music libraries for. But when it comes to like indie artists, you know, actual, you know, artists with fans that tour, that maybe get their stuff on independent radio stations, they're climbing the charts on Spotify, but they don't have a record label deal, but they're really doing it. It's a, you know, still these are copyrights that matter. It's not faceless production music. That's kind of where that third like tier of like sync company it comes in, where these are real artists. It's not production music. They're unsigned, they're independent, but we're representing to them to your, and within that space the fees are pretty flexible. I mean, it's a negotiation like anything, but when you're dealing with Sony, there's a floor they won't go below, you know. No matter how small the artist is, they're signed to Sony, so it's like this is the hard floor. We're not taking less than $10,000 for this, and it's like I don't always have that. So if I go to you know, this independent company and I go, I've only got $4,000 and we need a song and this is pretty cool and I like it, will you do a deal with me? That's usually the space where they will, and it's still more than I would pay for a library queue. If that
And that $4,000 may not mean much to
Yeah,
that Sony artist, but for an independent artist, it definitely helps.
yeah,
And it's a good day for an independent artist when
For
they get
real.
$4,000, or
especially because
minus the sync rep fee, whatever they take.
and this is a good illustration of why, because like when you look at that, the difference between like that low tier Sony artist, like it's like a baby band that Sony just happened to sign, right? Nobody knows about them, but they're still on Sony. And let's say we're talking about Sony's music publishing, and let's say that Sony Music Entertainment owns the recording, but those are two totally separate companies. And then there's 4 songwriters on that. And it's like, let's say I had only $4,000. Well, Sony's looking at this not from the perspective of the artist, but they're going, great. So we only get $2,000 out of this. And then Sony Music Entertainment gets the other 2,000, but from Sony Music Publishing, they're like, well, this hasn't recouped, so we're getting, all of it. Or if the deal has recouped, they're like, now we're getting 30% of 2,000, and then the other two remainder is broken up between 4 writers. Like, it's suddenly pennies. Like, it doesn't matter to anybody anymore. But for your company, it's like, when I give that $4,000 to you and you represent both sides of that on behalf of the artist, then they get the whole 4,000 minus your commission. But
Yeah,
better.
which on average, which I like to talk about on average what we're seeing in the industry, because there's still some very predatory stuff going on out here. But there is what I'm seeing that's becoming more like normal, and this is just for the creatives who are listening in today or viewing. I'm finding 25 to 30% for a sync rep agency or a sync agency that Michael was referencing. These are like that boutique. They're not a label, they're not a publisher. About 25 to 30% of the sync fee has been pretty standard. There are some who will go up to 50%. Which,
Yeah.
but here's the deal. You have to know your own value, and you have to know when it's time for you to play ball like that and when it's not. If somebody's delivering $100,000 and they're taking 50%, yeah, well, if I still end up with 50,000, so you just have to think through like what makes sense for your catalog, what makes sense for the creatives that you represent, and what makes sense for you. It's not a one size fits all deal term, if you will. Now, I am seeing also there are companies who like to take 50% publishing. Um, you know what? You have to decide, is the value that they're adding to my catalog, are they coming in like knee deep in and they're like building catalog with me? Does that make sense? Are they instrumental in the development of that record and making sure that it gets to a sync ready space? Those are all questions that you just have to ask yourself. Does it make sense to assign that much of my publishing to another entity? But they're all things that you should consider. I don't think you should not consider anything. Consider it all and then just make an informed, empowered decision. I would share this about value. There's one song that we had that was synced with Walmart on a Walmart campaign for $15,000. Then there was the same song had a Canadian show, and I don't even want to get on this. Canada is the math doesn't math over there, but anywho, they got they wanted the same song and they were willing to pay $500 for it. Well, I guess in my naivety and in my ignorance, I was just like, it makes sense. I just got 15 grand for this song. Here's the deal. If somebody wants to give you money, I don't care if it's 500 or if it's 15,000 for something that you created that's typically going to sit on your hard drive and get nothing, you do the deal if it makes sense. So thankfully, my sync rep that I was working with on that deal, she was like, look, yeah, we're going to accept this, and I'm going to tell you why. Because this is a young music supervisor with a low budget, but she loves this artist. Now, that music supervisor is going to grow and they're going to evolve in this industry, and you don't want to be the person that wouldn't play ball with them because they didn't have the budget that you preferred. And once she broke it down to me like that, it made sense. And it was either 500 or nothing. Because
Right.
the 15,000, we had already got that. So you kind of got to think of each time that a song can be licensed, it can be licensed multiple times, which is the beauty of intellectual property.
That's right.
So it might make you 15 grand one time and it might make you 500. Hey, guess what? It's not sitting on my hard drive making nothing. So I'll take it. Play ball if you can.
Yeah, can I add something to that actually? Because that's a really good point. What often gets lost, and it's something that I like to talk about in the Making Money with Music book that I wrote, is that there's a difference between income that you make that's active, income that you make that's passive. Now, passive sounds like a negative word, but it's like the best word ever when you're talking about income,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
passive income comes to you when you're sitting on the couch and your song is making money from you. They're just paying you money so they can use your song. They do all the work. They synchronize it. They decide how they're going to deal it. So, I mean, your music licensing is something that as Mimi was just saying, you can license it many, many, many times, and it has different, not just value for different people, but they have different budgets. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, because I want to be clear about this. It is not the same as you charging per hour of your time. So like if you're going to go into a studio and one person says I'll give you $100 an hour, and another one comes in and says five, you're going to be like, no, I don't do it for $5 an hour because that's your time. But if it's your song, it's okay. You've licensed it. It's not setting a level, and in fact, the way that the contracts are usually written, they're not supposed to share how much they paid for it. So you can license it again tomorrow for 20,000, even though you did this much and then this much and then this much. There's a second point about this that often gets lost, and I want to be really clear about this. I mentioned this at the beginning, but when your song gets used in a work, the thing that should be happening, I didn't mention this, is that they should be submitting a cue sheet. A cue sheet is something that helps you get royalties. It says at this point in the audiovisual work, this song was used. That cue sheet can get submitted to your royalty agencies. And then when your song that was used, let's say in a television show, as mine was for a person here that we worked on, and then we actually did a television show. We're like, okay, can you fill out a cue sheet? He got worried that he'd have to pay something. It's like, it's not you that pays it. It's not the producer. It actually is when it's played on TV, when it's played in the various works that it's done,
Get the
they submit
performance
that to
right.
the royalty agency, and the royalty agency says, oh, that song is played at this time. That's something that comes up when you register your song for royalties, which you should do no matter what, any of this stuff. If you just try to get your song heard, don't worry about licensing. You should do it. But when your song gets licensed and then it gets played in movie theaters, on TV, wherever it's played, you actually can get royalties for it. And so just because it's licensed for X doesn't mean that you can't get royalties later for whatever it is that you're going to get the royalties for. So I just want to be clear that there's other income streams that come off of the licensing.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had to explain that to producers before too that are worried about like paying residuals. And
Yeah.
another thing about that is that like this is how I've always explained it too. It's like not only are you not paying for it, but it's already been paid for because the PROs negotiate these rates with the broadcasters, and they pay massive amounts of money. The broadcasters pay massive amounts of money up front for the entire year based on perceived like hours of programming. So this
Right.
is like a way that like this artist can go get their percentage of the money that's already been paid to BMI.
Paid.
Like
Yes.
it's not, it's already been paid.
It doesn't come from their pocket. It's some
Yeah.
work that they have to
Yeah.
do, but I'm like, please, this
Yeah.
is part of the reason I'm letting you do it, even if it's less money. It's because I get something on the back end that doesn't come out of your pocket or anything related to you. And they
Yeah.
relax a little bit. But you should make sure, I mean, I want to be further clear that when you do this negotiation, if you're doing it on your own, that they should include a that they have to do that cue sheet, and send it in. And
Yeah.
there's no reason why they should. It's contractually that it's not a big deal on their part.
Yeah.
Independent creative, I'm gonna stress it again, like because no one is doing this stuff for you, it is important that you know these things because the average person wouldn't even know to ask for a cue sheet, even and know that that producer is not responsible for paying that. I just need the form so I can register the cue sheet with the performance rights organization. So I hope you guys are taking notes. I hope you guys are gonna listen to the playback because there's a lot of good information going forward.
Yeah, one thing I wish that we did in the US is pay performance royalties on theatrical, which
Yeah.
they don't do here, but they do in Europe and most other parts of the developed
The
world.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy, like that can be significant. I mean, because like in the UK, I think it's almost 2% of box office receipts go back to music royalties.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
I didn't
been,
know that. That's good.
yeah, it's based, I know, of course, it's based on like, seconds of music in the thing. So who benefits the most from it is generally the composer, right?
Yeah.
But like, but imagine like if you're a composer and you did a huge blockbuster movie that earns like, $1 billion worldwide, well, take half of that off the table for America. But like in Europe, it's like, let's say it makes like $500 million in Western Europe, and you're getting like between 1 and
2%.
2% of like you've got 50 minutes of music in this movie because you did the score, so most of the that calculation comes back to you, that's a couple $1 million, you know?
Yeah, that would be astronomical.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Since we're on
So
the subject of like spinoff revenue, another one I want to share with you all, because again, I'm still learning stuff every day. And I love when I get a surprise check. SAG Afro, when you're doing a
Yes, that's
when
another
you're doing
royalty that most people
advertising,
miss. Right.
yeah, when you're doing an advertising and there is your vocal from the song is actually being utilized on that particular ad, they are now, the union is now seeing you as a voice actor and you get paid because your vocals were used in an advertising. So that, and that's sometimes can be pretty sizable amounts as well. I mean, uh, so again, just knowing where all of this money is generated and understanding how to put yourself in position to collect it is essential. There's another one too. If a TV show is syndicated, if it makes syndication, you're getting your back end royalties for that. So sync to me is a long game. It is like having real estate, right? It's digital real estate. And even if your song is not getting value today, the possibility and the opportunities, as long as you're going after and you're meeting supervisors and you're just, working doing the work, at some point it is highly probable that you're going to bring some value to your catalog. Just like a property could sit on a lot empty with no value. Think about Nashville 10 years ago, and now think about Nashville today. Somebody's cashing in because they had the right property and they held on to it until it was time for, for the value to come. So just keep in mind, everybody stay encouraged on this journey of sync licensing, because it's a long journey. It's not a quick sprint. It took me 5 years to monetize music consistently in this space. But I do think it's worth it if this is what you really want to do, and if this is an opportunity that you see yourself thriving and doing well in. The opportunity is here. I just want to be clear. Regardless of the challenges, the opportunities are here.
Yeah, a lot of what I talk to about musicians on the business side is the absolute foundation to get that type of thing that Mimi has, because she's done the royalty registrations and everything else. And so what I often like to say is it's like spend a weekend, register for every royalty organization that's out there, and then you have to wait until they approve your membership, and then spend another weekend and register every song you have before you get it out there. And then some of these things that are coming in, the kind of checks that Mimi is getting could be something that you're getting too. That's what often gets missed. It's a little bit of administration and business side. And sorry, you have to put a little business hat on.
Yeah,
I
you have
constantly
to.
have to. Well, you
You
say
have
that,
to.
but honestly, you'd be surprised. I ran into this person who came back from LA here, and he's here in Chicago in the same facility that I'm in, and not too far from where you used to live, Michael.
yeah.
It's not too far, Old Irving Park area, or kind of near that, Avondale. But in any case, a little bit further, I think north from you. But in any case, we were talking because Michael used to live in Chicago, so that
Yeah.
was what that little call out's all about. But the point is, I ran into somebody. I talk to every musician I can, because just like Mimi said, I'm always learning something new when I talk to people. I always pick up another piece of info or everything. So I talked to somebody who actually made a full career of music, and um, I'm not going to say who it is so that I can tell aspects of the story, because I'm so interested in stories like this. But multiple times his career ran aground and ran out of money and did stuff. And so I got into a little bit because he had released multiple pieces of music as a producer, as a every aspect of the industry, not just the artist, but the others. And I mean, there's royalties you can make as a producer. There's royalties you make as the composer. There's royalties you make as the label. He's done all of the above. And I'm like, okay, have you done this royalty and that royalty? I started to mention different ones. He's like, no, I haven't heard of that. And I'm like, you were doing it for a living and you got your music out there, but I said, I want to help you. It's just like, which is why I'm like doing this not for profit, and like we're teaming up with cities and everything else to provide this education. We have like an online learning platform is how we're doing it. But the point is, it's like educate yourselves on everything related to royalties, sign up for everything. My book has it. I'm not here to sell my book. I don't care if you get it from the library if you need to, but sign up for all the royalties you can. and then put your music out there with all of this stuff so that you're collecting everything that Mimi's talking about and she's been getting for the songs. Be clear on the cue sheet. Be clear also one more thing that I think is worth mentioning in this panel I haven't heard yet. But the license terms that you choose are important and can matter. Now, if you're going through a library, they're probably pretty formulaic and you won't have to worry about it, and that's fine. That's nice and easy. If you're negotiating directly with somebody like Michael or somebody like the organization that Michael's representing, then you're going to see license terms that one of them might have impacted something that came from Mimi's story, which is that she licensed it again. The reason why she could license it again is no doubt you didn't have an exclusive
Non-exclusive.
clause. It's
Yep.
non-exclusive. So you might be like, well, what does that mean? Is that like a special membership type of thing, like exclusive membership? No, it means that if you have a license that's exclusive, then only they get to use it, which means that you should charge more. You can
Correct.
also restrict it to region, which we did when we licensed mine to Disney back then. It was just restricted to a certain region. And if they want it to be worldwide, they should have to pay you more. There's all these other aspects that, like, as it gets broader and broader use and more time and more uses, more different uses. Oh, it can be used in video games as well as on this. Well, you should charge more for this type of thing. Why do I say all this? None of this is formulaic. Welcome to the part of the music industry that's entirely negotiable, 100%. And so all these, like literally in my book, I have nothing but a list of here's all the terms, and for each of them, as they get broader, you should charge more. How much more should you charge? You could do the Dr. Evil thing, $1 million. It's
$1
up to
million.
you. And you should, make sure you get something for it. But the exclusive one in particular is the one I say to look out for. The other one where they can really get you, and I can't tell you enough to look out for this one, and I think everyone's going to nod, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, is if you see work for hire or that they're going to take on the rights of your song, then they own your song. You don't own it anymore. Do not give away the rights to your song. License your song for a particular use, for a particular amount of time.
Another cool thing about working with sync reps and sync agents is that they'll do the heavy lifting of the negotiating, or they'll do the
Right.
contract stuff. So if you don't feel comfortable enough in your ability or your expertise, if your expertise is making the music, then yes, I definitely am a fan of partnering with people who have that expertise, who can, deliver for you what you need delivered. So it's just like delegating or outsourcing certain parts of the business, but it all has to get done. So either you're going to do it, or it's not going to get done, or you're going to, have somebody else or outsource someone else to do that for you. And then,
Yeah.
of course, they're going to be compensated for doing that part of the work for you.
Yeah, when it comes to exclusivity and work for hires, the things I would say is like the exclusivity clauses are going to be, you're going to see those a lot more commonly in advertising and
Right.
pretty much never in film and TV.
Right.
Like ads care, like brands care a lot more about like if somebody else is using the same song as them. Because like if they're licensing music, generally the reason is because they're leveraging some sort of cachet of this. They think it's cool either because it's a well-known song and they want to leverage that, or because it's an unknown song and you're a cool indie artist and they want to leverage that because that's the audience they're speaking to. So ads will often like things exclusively because they don't want another brand licensing that same song for a competing product and making them look like chumps, because like they want to feel like their music that they're using is cool and special and like they found it. So, and that's also generally ads tend to pay bigger dollars overall. So if they're hopefully the fee's good, but if they want it exclusively, it should be more than not. I've never in doing film and TV, I've never had a reason to need an exclusive license for a song, because just songs are used all over the place in movies and TV, and generally it's not that big of a deal. If we want something unique and original to the film, that's where a work for hire comes in. We'll usually have it made. And so, scores, for example, composers that we contract to do the underscore for the film, those are almost all work for hires. We pay them a certain fee. We own that music for the film and the show. Then sometimes there are occasions where that extends to songs, where original songs that are made for the production, and this could be outside of the purview of the composer. Maybe we go to a cool songwriter and say, hey, we want you to write us a song for like this on-camera scene where somebody's like the star is going to be singing it.
Mhm.
Those are usually work for hires. You pay them hopefully what it's worth for them to create that for you and then to own it. And that's all a negotiation too, because sometimes if it's not really in the budget to fully buy them out, then the compromise is we just would like you know, a license to use this, you know, for forever. You can keep the rights. We'll pay you less to do it because we can't afford to buy you out on the rights. So, but usually on, especially on like, you know, studio productions, you're gonna buy out the rights to the song. But even in that case, mostly the creator is still going to at the very least have their writer's share of royalties, and then also on top of that you usually get some sort of like producer artist royalty on the mechanical, so that there is still a revenue stream. And then beyond that, even like on the when you're talking with big artists, like when Pharrell wrote Happy for whatever that Despicable Me movie is, it's like he still has a big chunk of the publishing on that too. Like Universal paid him a lot of money, and I think they probably took 50% or more of that publishing. They're both making a lot of money on that, you know.
Right. Win-win deals. Win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that all is kind of a negotiation. It's maybe it's a work for hire, but you retain 20% of the publishing, or maybe they take it all, but you get, you know, your artist royalty and your writer share. There's a lot of ways to slice that.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it all starts with knowing your rights.
Yeah.
It all
Yes.
starts with knowing your rights and knowing what is leverage and what is negotiable. I want to speak to exclusivity to what you can expect from sync agencies and from publishers. So typically, traditionally, if a publisher signs a songwriter, typically that songwriter is exclusive to that publisher. In the sync licensing space, with the emergence of sync license agencies, sometimes they will ask for exclusivity with a songwriter or artist. Most times they're asking for exclusivity of the song, not the writer, which means that that particular writer is available to continue to work on other projects outside of that particular sync agency. So just beware, they all exist. The questions that I'm always asking myself to see if it makes sense is, one, what is that sync rep doing to that's worth exclusivity? If they are doing and they're rolling their sleeves up with you and they're helping you build it out, absolutely. I don't think that's a tall ask. I think that is fair. If they're asking for exclusivity and they're not doing anything but pitching your music, I have learned that exclusivity gives them more buy-in, so they are going to be more tenacious about working your catalog versus someone who's non-exclusive. So I have found that music sync license reps, if there's exclusivity, they are more partnered with that creative or more partnered with that person. And you see more, I've seen more progress. I can't speak for everyone. That I have music that is exclusive, I have music that's non-exclusive. I have some creatives that I partner with that I negotiated an exclusive situation with. My agency also pitches music out. So it just depends on the situation, but I'm always evaluating, does it make sense? What am I getting for exclusivity? Because you should be getting something. And just evaluate if it makes sense for you. I prefer exclusivity. I like partnerships. I like partnerships that win. I like working with people who are competent and efficient and effective at what they do, because I'm very competent, efficient, and effective at what I do. And that has worked for me as far as generating money from sync licensing, is being very niche, understanding what I'm great at, and then finding people who are as equally great as I am in the area that they're in. So those to me make up great partnerships. And I think all independent creatives should be thinking about their relationships that they're entering like that. Who can
As
I
a
win with? Who can I win with? That's
yeah.
what we want to know. Who can we win with?
As a music supervisor, I also am like, I tend to be more comfortable knowing that the song is exclusively controlled by a single party. I mean, I license things from non-exclusive companies all the time too, and it's just the nature of the business. But if I had if I could recreate the world,
Get
I
all exclusive.
yeah, I prefer that everybody's represented exclusively because it is cleaner, and it leaves
Cleaner.
room for somebody challenging somebody else's like, deal with that song or artist if there's
Yeah.
multiple non-exclusive things. I mean, I get that it's a gamble for artists to be locked into a deal, and also to some extent, it's just it can be harder to get non-exclusive representation because those catalogs tend to be much choosier about. It's like,
Yes,
you know, getting a label deal.
that's exactly the problem, right?
You know, it's not everybody's not just handing out exclusive deals. If that's their business model, then they want a very highly curated catalog of stuff they know they can make money with. But also, for the artist, it's going to usually mean that the commission will be lower. If
Yeah.
they're repping you exclusively, they're probably taking less of your income versus non-exclusively, they're taking a bigger chunk.
More,
It's
yeah.
more of a risk for them, you know.
And they're not as vested. I like get vested with me because I'm 100% vested.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, though, you reminded me of a couple things that I've run into from other artists that might be of interest to the audience here, though. One of them is that those exclusive deals, especially ones, if you just sign up online, you have to be really careful about the certain types of exclusive deals that basically say that they are now your agent no matter what happens. That is to say, if you find a deal on your own, then they're taking that cut anyway. It doesn't matter if they're doing the work or not doing the work. They just have the rights to that music. And if they're not doing the work, like I agree with you, Mimi. I'd like them to be all in with me, but if they're not, and then they just license your music and then it's stuck there and they're not working it. And if you work it yourself, you're doing all the work and they're taking a cut, which sucks. So
Yeah.
you
I've
get,
been in every deal imaginable. I was
oh,
stuck in
I'm
that deal for
sorry if you
3
ran into that one.
I was in a deal for 2 years, nothing but maybe $1,000 generated, but all my
Mm,
catalog was locked there. I've been in a deal with a partner for 2 years that, I mean, we've been crushing it for 3 years together. I've been
nice.
in a deal where I was pitching my own stuff, had modest success there just because you have, like Michael just said, they prefer to work with, more established, reputable agencies because there's again, we're dealing with legal matters, guys. It's not just
That's right.
music and
It's
having fun. Like
complicated. These
this is
deals
a
are not,
legal
these
this is a
contracts are not
legal situation.
simple.
Yeah, it's
You-
a legal situation. And the music business is unnecessarily complicated, right? But there are pathways to success and it is learnable. We're not trying to figure out how to get to the moon or how
No.
to cure diseases. Like we're making music and learning how to make money with music. So it's learnable. You can learn this. You can excel at it. And I just believe that, if you made up your mind that you want to be successful in this space, it is possible. You will do the work. You the captain of your own ship. You will get out here and make it happen. But do the work. That's all I can pray. Sitting around doing nothing is not gonna get you the success you want. You got to do the work. And you gotta learn and you gotta rework and you gotta read. I sit in more sessions, re-editing, rewriting, read this. I'm like the person. Just call me again. My new name is again because I'm always got to do what we got to do to get it to where it
Nice.
needs to be. And that is the diligence and the consistency that's needed for success in anything. This is not specific to single licensing. That's just a successful mindset.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I just realized there's one more term that came up that most people don't know. I've learned to teach real quickly for the audience. This will be quick. There's a difference between curated and uncurated libraries, and that word was thrown out. I just want to make sure people understand that. A curated library is basically a library where they, for lack of a better term, audition your music and decide whether they want to put it in or not. And curated libraries tend to get more attention as music supervisors because they care about it. They also tend to be more often exclusive and more often really willing to rep the music and really push it. Uncurated libraries are things like SongTrader, Song TRADR, which says, yeah, upload your music, say all the metadata, put it up here. It's just a library. Magnitude is similar, I think, and all of them have different terms. You should read them very carefully, but they're not curated. They don't say no to music, and therefore there's a difference in quality. And not every music supervisor has time to go to an uncurated library because it's just a big pile of music.
Yeah.
So there's a difference here, and the terms are going to be different. Be aware of this. I actually have a part of my book where I talk about this, just to be clear. You should look at music libraries because if you're not going to make sync your main game, you can easily just put your music in uncurated libraries and move on and do other activities with your actual time. And then if it gets licensed, great. You make some mailbox money and you don't have to do any work. So that's another way to play this game that I've seen be successful. It depends on how you want to do it.
I mean, I think that also speaks to the fundamental difference between like the business model, like the library business model versus the artist business model, and
Yeah.
very
For
different.
Yeah.
artists.
You know, like if you're trying to be the next Taylor Swift or you know, and you're not just focused on your songs and movies and TV, but you're touring and you're selling merch and you want fan engagement and radio and all the things that come along with an artist's career, then synchronization is just one part of that pie, and it can be
The
good for the
strategy,
other
yeah.
That's
aspects,
right.
but it's not the only thing. The library model is purely volume. It's just like get as many minutes and hours of music on programming as possible, just to make the biggest back end. And the people that build music libraries build them to sell them, basically. It's like you're going to crank out as many cues for as many years as you possibly can, get them all over television, build it up to the point where your quarterly NPS is at a place where, you know, BMG would pay you an 8-time multiple for it, sell your
Oh, that's
business.
how the game works on the back end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because valuation is based entirely on NPS. It has nothing to do with sync. Like you might get, you know, 500 on one sync and 10,000 on another sync. I mean, syncs are great. That's good money, but it's the back end. It's the publishing royalty that it creates catalog valuation. So they're going to look at what you earn quarterly. They take all sync revenue off the table because that's going to come, you know, it
Sporadic,
fluctuates
yeah.
much. And then they go, you know, they look at the, you know, the going rate of the market, which changes year to year. Sometimes it's a 5x, sometimes, you know, in the 90s, it was like a 18, 20x. And then they make you an offer, and certain, you know, if it's a compelling, you know, music library, the big guys like BMG, Universal, Hypnosis, whatever, they'll pay you more than it's worth to take it off the street from their competitors. So the library game has always been volume and then sell, and hopefully at the height of the market. So you make your money and then you maybe build another library or just go buy a house and have, I don't know.
And do your next project.
All right,
Yeah.
y'all. We are about 12 minutes away from the end of the webinar, so I want to give us a chance to open this up for
Oh
questions.
yeah, totally.
Audience members, you can use the chat to ask questions. I'm going to pose them to the panelists. Anybody can take them.
Get as many as we can.
Yeah, just as many questions as we can. We'll try to answer
Keep
those.
we'll keep the answers concise so that we can maximize our 12 minutes.
Sounds good.
Absolutely. So if you have a question, put that in the chat, and we're gonna have the panelists answer those. But I'm gonna ask the first one to get us started while people are typing, and that is, what are some of the red flags when you're negotiating these sync deals? Like, what are red flags you should look for? Because y'all talked about like the differences in deals, you know, all these sort of nuances, but like, what is something that they should really be on the lookout for that is a signal that it's a really bad deal? Maybe look closer, walk away, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think one major red flag for me, for anybody, whether it's me as a songwriter or representing somebody, is anybody who's trying to take your songwriting percentage. Like that is never a negotiable. You wrote the song, unless it is a work for hire, and you know that going in, but that should never be up on the table for discussion. Or like people who sometimes they're like, especially in urban music, they're like just splitting random people in. It's like, no, we're not doing that. You wrote the song. I don't think songwriting percentages should be opted around like leverage. You wrote it or you didn't write it.
Well, yeah, and that difference being, it's like, you know, if they're trying to give you a work for hire deal on a pre-existing song, that like work for hire, it can be fair, but if you're actually doing a
That's
work
what I was
for
gonna say.
hire, but if
Yeah,
you've got a
work
song
for
that,
it.
yeah, if they're talking about
Exactly.
a pre-existing song and they're giving you a work for hire deal saying now we own it, you're like, well, you didn't
Yeah.
actually write it for them. This is your song, so that's why licensing exists.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
you retain the ownership. They
Yeah.
get a license to use it in a particular way that you prescribe. That's what
Yeah.
I was gonna say. If you see white work for hire in something where someone's not just paying you to write a song for them to own,
Yeah.
that's fine if you're gonna do that. But if that's the case, then just don't run away. Run away.
Yeah.
That's
If you
not.
think you're signing a licensing deal and it's a work for hire deal, that would be a red
That's
flag.
somebody being very dishonest at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I've learned too, there's a lot of there's middlemen who are important, and then there's unnecessary middlemen in the sync licensing space who come in and take a big cut of things, and they're nothing but a connector. And so just, do your own investigation of, the reputation of the creatives, and then evaluate what services are they providing to you to be able to, to make sense and justify what they're asking for in percentage and things like that.
All right, I'm going to ask our first question from the audience. Ariel Bowie asked, she said, my last project record, Real and Fantasy, was commissioned by Music Library Audio Network. They paid for the making of the record and supported commercial release, and I don't need to recoup. They own master's rights and I have writer's rights, and the royalty split is 50-50. Was this a good deal? What is the stance on giving up master rights? And then she says, also, what are some of your favorite sync libraries, agencies, etc.? And how should artists pick them? So that's a lot, but if y'all want to pick
Yeah,
parts of
go
that,
ahead.
feel free
I
to talk about it.
I can speak to that just because, like, I mean, I'm very familiar with Audio Network, and that is their business model. Like,
That's
they
it, yeah.
they basically want to. I mean, and like a lot of libraries generally either want to own everything or they do like exclusive deals for a period of time so that like they don't have to like deal with um you know just
The business later, yeah.
weird rights situations. But Audio Network is very specific in the sense that like they basically produce everything that they represent. So they'll go to an artist or a composer and basically say, hey, we want to pay you X amount upfront to deliver us this thing, and we're going to own it. And then yes, like she said, she's got a royalty split on probably in mechanicals because they also release all of their stuff on Spotify and all the streaming platforms. And then she's got her writer's share. I mean, I would say it's like, their deals are at least pretty transparent. Like they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes on it. It's just one of those things where you just got to look at it and be like, is the amount of money they're offering me for this worth the amount of work that it's going to take for me to do it? Because most of your money is going to come from that fee up front, and it's like they're paying for the production. You work out a budget with them. What's it going to cost to make this album for us? They pay for that, and hopefully you get a little bit extra, and that's mostly what you're going to get with the exception of a trickle of royalties here and there. I mean, they have a really high quality library and it gets very well utilized. So, and I've licensed stuff from them before. I think it's just like, if you felt like it was worth the money to do the work for them, then it was a good deal. Mostly when it comes to songwriters with Audio Network, the rule of thumb is like, you don't want to give them your A material because like shit, if
You're
you
being competing with yourself.
yeah, it's like, oh no, I wrote a hit song and now they own it.
Yeah.
But
I will also say too, remember, keep in mind, whoever pays for the recording typically would own the master. So that's that's fair. That part of it is fair if they are compensating you to create and work in the studio. So that is a very common practice.
yeah, it's just different than like a label deal in the sense that like, when you sign with a record label, they may like pay for your record and there's like a whole time period and like recoupment, but like, at the end, like assuming you recoup your deal and after some period, maybe the rights would revert to you or you guys share it, like the percentages change. That's just not going to happen with
that deal.
the Audio Network because you're basically making them a production library and they're going to own it forever.
Yeah, don't write a hit with them.
Yeah. All right. So, what curated libraries? Julie Grower asked, what curated libraries do you recommend submitting music to? Also, will most engineers keep stems for a period of time? And what stems are essential to get right away when mix is delivered?
I'll speak for the mix. For me, for stems, I would get, if you paid for that, I would get all the stems. Just
Get
get all the
everything. Yeah, heck
get all the stems. And then if you sometimes engineers will charge an additional fee to have you group them by instrument. But I would just get all your I would get all the raw and I would get all the mixed the processed stems. I would get them all.
Yeah, I mean, like these days, especially since everything's being done, in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, like that's
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't take them much at the very least to like turn over the session to you. So you could always open that up like on another system. Although I guess sometimes people have matching plugins and shit, which is why you want to get the stems. But at the very least, take the session so you could like potentially reopen it and remix it. But yeah, with the basic stems scenario is just kind of it's just a handful of groups. It's like you want vocals, you want guitar. I mean, it depends on what kind of music we're talking about. But let's say we're talking about a rock band, right? It's like get it. You want a stereo drum stem, stereo guitar stem, bass probably on its own. If there's keys, stereo keys, a lead vocal stem, and then probably backing vocal stems. That would pretty much cover it. And when it comes to stems, yes, definitely get them. Good to have. In most cases, as a music supervisor, I don't need them, but occasionally I do. So it's good for them to be available. The average sync is just going to be like a background needle drop placement. At the very least, I'll maybe need like an instrumental if we need to edit something just to kind of, but usually I don't need stems, but occasionally I do. So they're good to have just in case.
And that's really to keep your stems is just in case. A lot of times, you're dealing with engineers who are not backing their stuff up. Their hard drive crashes, their computer crashes, and now you don't have anything. So just get into a practice of getting what you've paid for.
Yeah.
One thing to add.
And you
Oh,
have your
go
external
ahead.
hard drive. You bring your own external hard drive to the studio.
Well, one thing to add is that based on some other music supervisors that I've interviewed, the ones for ads and especially the ones for movie trailers said that they really did want the stems because they have a kind of a blended way of putting together a certain type of thing. And so it depends on the types of projects that you're going to be doing. Here's the thing, if you want to be licensable by everybody, get those stems and have them.
Yeah.
And this is true, by the way, and somewhat vaguely related to this, of all of the types of visual material you get. So if you've got anybody doing some graphical work for you, get the original like Photoshop files so you can reconstitute it and do it. That's true of like every kind of production that you have, and it's something that we highly recommend.
Yeah,
to do.
good point, because ads and trailers do use stems a lot more than like
They do.
than like film and
TV and
TV
film.
stuff. And I don't work in those spaces as much, but especially trailers, like they remix
Yes, trailers.
everything.
I
So
will
yeah.
say this too, on the bounces, typically you're getting a full, instrumental, and like a TV track. Your TV track is usually going to be in the advertising space. That's my specialty. It's usually going to be instrumental plus vocal ease. That's your non-lyrical oohs, ahs, yada yada, blah blah blah. It's that. So the instrumental plus that is really, we call it sync gold in the advertising space. So
Yeah.
those are
And
usually the bounces you want.
as far as her question about libraries, I do think Audio Network's great. They have high quality stuff. They're small, but it's like real, but relative to some of the bigger libraries, but it's good shit. APM is probably one of the biggest, just period, and they have such a diversity that like I go to them a lot. 5 Alarm was also one of my favorites, although they were bought this year by a company called Slipstream that also bought Jingle.
Oh, Jingle Punks, really?
I hate Jingle Punks. This
Really?
doesn't recorded.
Oh, I
but-
want to talk to you later.
Awesome.
I want to.
Yeah, I never liked Jingle Punks, but that was part of the same deal. So they bought like 5 Alarm, Jingle Punks, and some other. So I think Slipstream is now like one of the biggest libraries because they bought several other. I thought 5 was particularly good. Jingle Punks was, just I don't know, kind of problematic for a lot of reasons,
Huh.
but anyway, Slipstream is an interesting new company, and so they've become one of the bigger ones. I mean, the kind of basic go-tos in the industry have always been like APM, Extreme, Killer Tracks. Like the thing is, those are all so big that you can find good stuff in there. The quality control on some of them have maybe been I don't know. I like the boutique libraries better, which is why I like Audio Network and 5 Alarm, because I felt like they were very like well curated and everything was like a good quality and not a lot of duds,
All right, y'all. Well, it is 4:30, so we are at time. But I want to thank Randy, Michael, and Mimi for joining us today, sharing their expertise and knowledge and experience. A wealth of information shared in a very short time today. Thank you again to the Tennessee Entertainment Commission for supporting this webinar series. I'm Jonathan Harwell-Dye with the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville, abcnashville.org. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here.
Thank you,
We
Jonathan.
are done for the day.
Thank you. Nice to meet
Thanks,
you.
Mike. Thanks,
It's a
Randy.
pleasure being on
guys.
with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, y'all
look
take care.
forward.